In this section of the Kegan reading, I think it's pages 100 to 125, we start by finishing up this idea about parenting and our capabilities as a parent, maintaining a third order of consciousness. And an interesting analogy about the ability to drive a stick shift or a manual car, and we liken this to a third order consciousness person. So one is not considered incapable of parenting when functioning on a third order consciousness, just like stick shift driving is dependent on a stick shift proficient person. The same applies to the many tasks of parenting that are often dependent on a fourth order of consciousness. You can sufficiently be successful parents on a third order of consciousness, but in order to meet all the expectations flawlessly and fully, a fourth order of consciousness is required. We also talk about the ideologies and traditions that we are born out of. And so we live in these constructed communities, and we have these ideas that are given to us by the communities in which we live. Fourth order consciousness calls for finding the support within yourself, kind of a disregard for the instinctual desire to find your support fully through others, where a third order of consciousness person might find their support. So in order to shift from third order to fourth order, a parent will need to find that support that will facilitate that jump, the support within themselves. So basically we finish up and finalize these thoughts on parenting with stating that third order consciousness is not the best or perfect fit for the job of parenting. It doesn't mean that it in and of itself is bad, or that parenting in and of itself, the expectations are bad, but the two together do not fit well. It is not sufficient given the expectations. We are going to move on to partnering, and we ask the question, is third order consciousness sufficient here? Successful partnering needs psychological independence, or psychological independence is required in successful and sufficient partnering skills in our modern day society. Psychological dependence is characterized by those who pledge psychological dependence is characterized by those who pledge absolute loyalty, fidelity, and faith in authority. So it would follow that independence is those who do not need those things, or who do not depend so heavily on those things. So we are back to Peter and Lynn, and these two are grappling with the reality that they are showing their psychological independence when previously they were so proud of their oneness. This psychological independence is becoming more evident, and that scares them. This new definition of closeness that we get with these modern day expectations states that a lower emphasis should be put on sharing particular values, and that a greater priority should be put on the cooperation between independent value generators. And this would follow that people who can independently create their values are those who are fourth order conscious. So while Peter still understands or maintains the understanding that closeness is a complete sharing of values, he views the difference between the regards as the end of his and Lynn's intimacy, whereas as Lynn is coming closer to realize that closeness can be achieved through a non-sharing of ideals, or an appreciation and recognition that each person has these different values that they hold and create and regulate separately. And I think that the value in this, or the fourth order consciousness, comes in the appreciation of the differences. So when we move from subject to our differences, as seeing ourselves as victim to this difference in each other, and become object to them, as being able to see our relationship to this relationship between values, then that's when we achieve fourth order consciousness and a greater closeness to our partner, as is expected as we learned in our last section, that's vital in this modern day partnership. We experience an expectation to achieve psychological independence and overcome the romantic approach to closeness. This same is also true about the requirements of maintaining our couplehood. It follows that the relationships and loyalties of the people that I value, I have to set limits to. We have to stand in relationship to these relationships, remain object to them in order to properly act upon them. So we have to see ourselves apart for or away from the relationships and how we act within them. So our problems concerning the relationships are more often than not based on things that are not based on things that we're lacking, like heart, courage, and will, but rather they're non-fit in the context between the two opposing parties. We make demands on each other's minds without considering that their capacities might not be sufficient to meet these demands. We don't know what level of consciousness another person has achieved, and therefore we can't request these non-fitting responses that do not fit their capability. So they emphasize making I statements out of you statements as a way to alleviate this tension and facilitate better communication. Who better understands and communicates your expectations than you? It then places the task of responding correctly and justly on the other person, which is described as sufficient, or as the best type of communication. Also, a danger in communications that it so heavily relies on the person's response. But what is more romantic, or what is most romantic, is whatever makes you feel loved up. We talk about this. And what makes someone feel more loved up than achieving an understanding of where the other person stands, what sort of things make up their expectations, and being okay with navigating back and forth between theirs and yours, understanding the beauty and adventure in each other's differences. Sorry this video is a little bit longer, but it was a very interesting chapter. I had a lot to say about it.